Okay. Awesome, 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 awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for taking the time out to come and share your Saturday afternoon with us. I appreciate it that while we're still on um, social distancing, and while that really means for most of us self quarantining, I do recognize the fact that you could be any place else but here with us online. And so I do want to thank you for coming out this evening or this afternoon for joining us. So thank you. I promise that I won't really be before you long, at least not longer than I have to on this first time that we're meeting together. My hope is that by the time we end our time here together, that I would have said something to you that would challenge you to, at the very least, do your own in-depth research to look at and examine and thoroughly investigate what you are standing on and what you are making decisions upon. So that is one of my underlining goals, just to let you know up front. For those of you who don't know, I don't know who's with us right now, but I am expecting some to be coming in and out during this time together. But for some of you who do not know, my name is Naima Williams. I am the founding apostle of Fire Groups of America, headquartered in Decatur, Georgia, which is an end-time ministry that also focus on biblical teaching for helping people develop in order to discover and position them to fully walk out their divine call and purpose. And so we utilize both a network of house churches as well as today's technology. So interestingly enough, with what we're dealing with today, it's not far-fetched for us because this is what we have been designed to do. And so in terms of being home and using the internet. And so I am also, in addition to that, I am also an active member of Gateway Restoration Church, headquartered in Forest Park, Georgia, under the apostolate of the apostles, doctors, Barbara Beeler and Leon Beeler, aid to the men. However, today's discussion is not geared toward the Christian only audiences. It is not, forgive me. Okay, so today is not geared toward Christian only audiences. If you're an American, then the information that I have to share with you today affects you today. If you're a mother or a father, a sister or a brother, better yet, if you're a human being, then the information that I have for you today affects you today. And it transcends most categorical lines that many of us are accustomed to limiting ourselves to. So it transcends geographical lines. It transcends ethnical lines. It transcends racial biases. It transcends economic and education statuses. It transcends whether or not you're Black or white. That's irrelevant. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, or if you're male or female. It transcends your political or apolitical stance. It transcends all of that. And what it really has to do with, it has to do with you. It has all to do with you. It has to do with your choices, your life, your freedoms, your family's freedoms, your rights, your future, the future of your children and your children's children. And I don't say those things lightly. I don't say those things callously. I don't say those things as buzzwords in order to capture your attention, to feed you with a bunch of stuff that is irrelevant to you. No, that's not what I'm saying. These things I'm saying because it is very relevant, and it is very we're at a pivotal moment in our history that we have got to become more involved and informed, not with just things we want to know about, not with biases determining what we are going to believe or not going to believe, but we need to look at the truth that's in front of us and begin to operate there. Let me keep on going. I'm going off a little bit. Let me keep on task. So for the longest, I've wondered how to begin discussions with you today, because there's a lot of information. And the information that I'm sharing with you today is not something that, well, let me kind of go back for a moment. Going back to what positions me here today in front of you. I cannot say that growing up as a child and through my teens and early 20s and 30s that I was into history, current events, historical or political views or anything of that nature. I was not into that. So you can't, I'm not a historian by love or by nature, or that's not my predisposition. That has never really been an interest of mine up until the beginning of the 2010s, roughly around 2011, 2012. That's when things begin to take a shift for me, where prior to then, my political views was like most people. I went with what was passed down to me. So if my mother or my father was a particular viewpoint, I naturally kind of went along with that. In addition to that, what I was told that I was supposed to be a part of, well, you're this color, so you're supposed to be a part of this, or people of this faith and this persuasion, they are a part of this particular party because they are known for taking care of this type of the concerns that you would have. And so that is what I lived most of my life as, if I even touched anything political, up until about 2012. That's when life had shifted for me, and I was put in a position where I had no choice but to begin to look at not what was being said, but what was being written into law. Not what was being passed down to me, but why was this something that I needed to look at? And does it now align with what my current sacred views are, my sacred beliefs are, my sacred faith is? Does it align with that? Or have I just went ignorantly on going based upon what words of what other people have told me, as with most of us do? To be quite honest, most of us do that because we trust what our parents have, and they trusted what their parents, but I had to see for myself. I was put in a position where I had to see it for myself. So now that brings me to today. So for the longest, I've been wondering how to begin discussions with you, because from 2012 to current, I've learned a lot. And it's been research, it's been documentation, it's been historical data, it's been things that is available to most people, documents and proof that in evidence that is available to the American people. But if you are not looking for it, if you don't know about it, if you're not actively pursuing it, then you don't know. And so with that being said, knowing that many of you, whoever is on the line today and those who will see this video, many people are going to be coming here with their own preconceived notions, with their own experiences, expectations, prejudices, and biases. So what I figured I would do in order to kind of break the ice a little bit and begin to set the tone of what the next couple of meetings will be like for us, I figured what I would do, and let me come out of share mode with you. I figured what I would do instead is I would share with you the first 5 minutes of a documentary that I do hope to be able to share with you later on in weeks to come. Because this documentary, it encompasses a lot of information. I'm only going to share 5 minutes of it, but I think the first 5 minutes says a lot. It says a lot. So I'm going to ask you to please turn your attention to what's being said in the video, and then we're going to discuss a little bit more about it once it is complete. So let me pull it up on my computer screen here, and then I am going to, stop it. Then I'm going to share it with you, which I'm doing that right now. And for those who are just signing on, I want to say thank you so much for joining us. I do look forward to all that will be shared and learned during this hour. Here we go. And this is the first 5 minutes again. So we're not going to look at the whole movie, but I think this is a good starter for our time today. Here we go.
I grew up in Cuba, and I never thought that Cuba would become a communist country. Many people at that time warned the Cuban that what was going on was a communist takeover, but we say no, that won't happen here. No one even dreamed that. And I see it, the same thing repeating here in the United States now. And I feel very uncomfortable about it because I know what is the end of it. And I know that after a while, there will be absolutely nothing that the American people will be able to do. And they will lose everything they own, everything they know. And don't even think that you will be even safe inside your own house, because you won't be. They will come and get you wherever you are. They will take your arms. They will take everything, and your way of life, everything. And you will be just a pawn of the state.
You and I have the courage to say to our enemies, there is a price we will not pay. There is a point beyond which they must not advance.
And this is the point I think Americans need to comprehend. If America goes down economically, it will go down militarily. If America goes down militarily, we all go down. The free world is finished, and it'll be finished for a very, very long time.
Everything, practically, is in a self-destructive mode.
We're in the most critical period we've been since the Revolutionary War.
We're not alert, we're not awake with what's happening.
They would just as soon see this country on its knees and everything equalized.
That concept of collectivism, big government, is a magnet for the predator class.
The plans for all this are to have everything globally in place by 2020.
If we're that dumb and we allow this to happen, we deserve everything we're going to get, because we're going to get it right in the neck.
We're headed into what could be a nightmare that would make all the atrocities of the 20th century look like they were a dress rehearsal.
When people are afraid, they ask government to do more, not less.
Their theories are designed to scare the people to believe there's a crisis when there is not a crisis at all. There's no crisis.
I think we're losing more and more freedom because we are afraid.
The left wants you to believe that catastrophe is always just around the corner. And the only way to avoid it is to do exactly what they say. But this film will show everything they do is just a Trojan horse of deceit, carefully crafted to advance their real agenda of finishing America off.
We have been the main stumbling block to world communism since it first raised its ugly head.
From the promotion of Islam to the propaganda of climate change, from the deceit of Common Core to the manufactured economic crisis, and from their manipulation of the evangelical church to the unsustainable debt burden. This film will show the issues are simply being used as a smokescreen to hide the purposeful, premeditated, treasonous attacks on the foundations of our freedom.
The war on religion has just purged us from being able to determine right from wrong.
You know what Alexander Solzhenitsyn said about Russia? How the communists took over Russia? He said, "We forgot God."
Their stated agenda, carved in stone on a monument in Georgia and outlined in documents placed in the Ark of Hope, is to eliminate 6.5 billion people by century's end. And they will succeed if we don't stop them.
This is not just a fight for the United States of America. This is a fight for civilization itself.
It's everything Karl Marx dreamed of before our very eyes.
I think they've pushed us over the cliff in ever since. America isn't going to fall. We are falling.
Sorry. I wonder how many of you feel. I wonder how many of you are accepting or receiving or hearing what was just shared with you. Understanding that there are many of us, we all come with different experiences, we all come with different positions and viewpoints, but this transcends that. It's not about my viewpoint. It's about what's been happening, what's happening before our eyes, and if we don't pay attention, where we're headed. Now, one of the things I do want to state is that this particular documentary that I hope to be able to share with you in the next week, it was created by a person by the name of Curtis Bowers. Curtis Bowers served in the House of Representatives representing the state of Idaho back in 2007. He made this his first installment, which was Agenda 1, Grinding Down of America. He put so much of our history, facts, and stats, many bits and pieces, like I would have a piece here, she would have a piece there, you would have a fragment, we would have random fragments, but those random fragments often get overlooked because they don't look that big or important until you start putting it together. And so please note also that the supporting speakers, both in that film and the previous film, that I hope, both of which I hope to be able to share with you in the months to come, are documentaries that include testimonials and information and facts by former congressmen, judges, military men, journalists, authors, professors from Ivy League schools and colleges, survivors from regimes that are anti-American. And so at the very least, we should be edified by their stories and hopefully informed by their experiences. So a lot of what is happening in our country has to do with, I'm kind of transitioning over. A lot of what has to do with our country has to do with the policies that are enacted and the laws that are passed. And we are at a crossroads here in America and at a critical moment in our history, and we can no longer afford to stand for what we say we believe in, but don't stand for it. As you know, as most of us know, this is an election year. And it's not just for presidential office, but it's also for all 435 congressional seats. It's for a number of seats in the Senate. It's for the governors in the select states, along with other offices in states throughout the country. It is quintessential for us to know which party stands for what values and beliefs, because a lot of well-meaning parents, construction workers, business owners, believers, men and women, people like you and I, are voting for and supporting platforms that no longer exist within a select party that it once did exist. And let me be clear by stating this, that it's not about a particular party. I'm not here to say vote this or vote that. That's not what I'm here for. But it's about the policies. It's about the policies because it's the policies that will make a difference in our freedoms and rights or lack thereof. Now, speaking of rights, those in faith, and I'm not going to just tailor it, just this portion of our time together to the people of faith. Those who are in the faith knows that the Bible speaks more from the standpoint of duty and responsibility and not rights or fairness. Yet we tend to think from a place of rights because the world that we live in promotes rights over responsibilities. But let's look at those two terms just briefly. The key difference between the two is that rights are privileges that a governing body grants to people, while duties are responsibilities that are designed to individuals. Rights can be defended and challenged in a court of justice, while duties not so much, because they deal with your moral character. So looking at something such as voting, which a lot of people, because people are losing confidence. People in the faith has been told to do certain things, and we have believed certain things. People just in America at large, we have lost a lot of confidence. And so we're thinking, well, I have a right, and it's my right not to get engaged, but we keep forgetting there's a difference between right and responsibility. And for those in the household of faith, your voting is based upon our faith and our beliefs. And in all, it's not about who we vote for, but it's about what we vote for, right? We go after the best policies made available to us because we can have good leaders who enact bad policies. Just the same, we can have bad leaders who enact good policies. History has shown this to be exemplified and has shown proof that this has occurred. If I can talk to those in the household of faith, we know that King David was a righteous king and leader, political figure, right? However, he had performed an ungodly act or unrighteous act when he performed the census in 2 Samuel 24, which resulted in God's judgment released against Israel, and tens of thousands of people were killed. Or we have King Hezekiah, who was also a good king, except he shared military secrets with the Assyrians, and as a result, it caused God's judgment to be upon the nation. Nation. Likewise, you can have a bad leader who enact good laws, right? Such as Cyrus the Great, who was the Persian king who released the Jews from captivity. So it's not the equality, it's not the quality of the leader. And I'm gonna ask everyone who's not speaking, please to put your device on mute. It's not the quality of the leader, but it's the quality of the policy that matters, right? For believers, how we come to an election has little to do with our personal preferences and everything to do with the righteousness per God's definitions and standards. Proverbs 14:34 tells us that righteousness exalts a nation, but sin condemns a people. Hear that. That means that it's the laws that exalts or condemns a nation. Again, the flaws of a leader has little to do in comparison to the flaws of the policy, right? This was true in biblical times. This has been true in historical times. And this is also true now in our time. Many times we have not been able to see past what we wanted to see, our preferences or our prejudices, but that has cost us in more ways than we recognize. There are some laws, speaking of laws, there are some laws that have completely changed our culture and our way of life. And most of those laws are won in modern cultural wars, came out of the judicial branch. I'm going somewhere with this, the judicial branch versus the legislative. So we know that we have three branches of government. However, the laws that have rocked our world or have changed drastically our culture and our way of living came out of the judicial system, such as decisions made on removing God's definition of marriage, abortion, not protecting the right of conscience. And so if I desire righteous to prevail in a nation, because remember, it's the laws that exalts or condemns a nation. So if I want the laws to exalt or condemn a nation, I need to look at the laws that are being enacted by my judges. Do they? So when I'm looking at who or what I'm voting for, I need to look at what kind of judges am I going to get with this, right? Are they going to hold the same definition that God holds to marriage, or are they going to create their own? Do they believe that lives matter, innocent lives, or do they believe in aborting babies? Do they believe in protecting freedom of conscience? Do they believe in protecting religious freedoms, freedoms of speech, or not so much? Do they believe that taxpayers should pay for the same sex or sex changes of transgenders? Do they believe that 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds have the right to determine if they should change sex and that taxpayers should pay for the hormones? Do they believe this? These have greater importance than superficial differences. This is an election year, and as we are considering which candidate to elect, there are a few things we need to consider. Number one, we talked about was judges. Number two has to do with, regardless of who you are, and please stay with me, at least if you don't come back to the rest of the meetings, at least finish this one, because there are some things that are going to be mapped out here, some things I want to present to you that would be helpful in deciding in your decisions later, as well as coming back again. Amen. And so so the first thing to consider is, what kind of judges am I going to get? Because it's about the policy, it's about the laws that are being passed. That is the primary objective and the focus that I need to keep account of. So number one, judges. Number two, Israel. How am I treating them? One of the reasons why United States have been very prosperous and powerful is because, number one, contrary, regardless of what your faith may be, you have enjoyed the freedoms and the prosperity that we have enjoyed because our founding fathers have built those structures that our constitutions have stood upon, based upon Christian and biblical standards. And part of that standard is the protecting and aligning with Israel. And according to scripture, for those who are in the household of faith, according to scripture in the book of Genesis 12, that has not ended, where he says, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. That covenant and promise has not ended. So number two, how does that person, because there's different, remember, you have congressional, all 435 seats are up for election this year. So it's not just presidential, it's an array. So what are their thoughts about Israel? Because we have seen in the news that there has been some very, very strong disparaging remarks that have been made and movements made against Israel. Number three, religious freedom. What are their thoughts about that? Do I have a right to worship? How do they define marriage? Is number four. And do they support abortion? It's number five. So the first two we talked about more elaborately, then we talk about the last three quickly. So those last three, the reason why those are so important or should be important to you is because they're very important to the Lord, to God, for those in the household of faith I'm talking to right now. And so why am I saying that? Why did I say that? Because out of all of the 613 laws that the Israelites given, it was condensed into the 10 Commandments. And those 10 Commandments, The first 4 laws, or the first 4 commandments, deal with the relationship with the Lord. This translates to your right to freedom, religious freedoms. We also know that based upon Scripture, how God values life, how he values the life, and where that life begins. It didn't begin once the baby is outside of the uterus, as it's being fought today, or people are trying to make that assertion today. We know that's not what Scripture says. We could just look at Jeremiah 1 for that. And we also know that that according to the Bible, he's already defined marriage, so we cannot redefine what the eternal creator has already defined. So those 5 issues should be prevalent on your list. Now, everything else, as far as climate change or tax reductions or what you feel, that should play a second role to this for those in the household of faith. There was, in the film that I shared with you, the clip that I shared, that I hope to be able to share in its entirety with you next week, one of the speakers said something that really caught my attention. And he said words, he said it in a way that it grabbed me, because it was words that I said, not the way he said it though. He said it more eloquently than I, but it was words and a sentiment I know let's share with him. And he said this, in essence, he said, we Christians in the West are not aware of, hear this, we are not aware of how much oppression we have in the United States. We are persecuted without even knowing it. They have told us, you cannot do this. And we have said, yes, sir, we won't. You cannot talk against sin. And we said, okay, we won't do that. So gradually, as Christians, we do what they allow us to do, while minding not to trouble the waters. And we would even go a step further as to rebuke those who trouble the waters, or if they did not submit to the status quo we were given. Okay, you can gather here for Sunday worship the best you can and then go home. Okay, we will, is what we will say. So in that sense, we accepted their limitations. We accepted their brand of Christianity. We accepted that we cannot nor should not influence our society or our government. We accepted that because we've been told you should not be in a political arena. You should not be concerned about social matters. But where has that been something that has been stipulated in the doctrine of Christ for those in the household of faith? So when he says this, it reminds me of a letter, and I'm going to show this. I'm going to put this on screen. It reminds me of a letter that was sent out. Listen, it was sent out amid 2006 elections. These letters was written and sent out by an organization by the name of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. And they were sent out to religious leaders and organizations during the 2006 election year. What they said and how they said it seemed one way. I'm not sure if I can get this clear on screen, but I'm going to make an attempt. But either way it goes, I am going to still read it to you so that you can hear what it is saying. So this is what it sent out again. Now, this is to the religious leaders. It says, "Dear religious leader, as election day draws near, candidates and their supporters may seek help or endorsements from your house of worship. Thus, this is a good time to familiarize yourself with the law governing electioneering by nonprofit organizations. The First Amendment protects the right of all Americans, religious leaders included, to speak out on religious, moral, and political issues. However, house of worship and other nonprofit entities classified under Section 501c3 and the Internal Revenue Service tax code are barred from endorsing or opposing candidates for public office and may not intervene directly or indirectly in partisan campaigns. This is what they sent out. Any activity designed to influence the outcome of partisan election can be construed as intervention. If the IRS determines that your house of worship has engaged in unlawful intervention, it can revoke the institution's tax-exempt status or levy significant fines on the house of worship or its leaders. Do you hear this? Do you hear this? In 1995, the IRS revoked the tax-exempt status of Birmingham, New York church for buying a full-page ad in USA Today opposing 1992 presidential candidate. The federal courts upheld the revocation. Other churches and religious ministries, including Pat Robertson's Christian Broadcasting Network and Jerry Falwell's Old Time Gospel Hour, have been subject to audits and retroactive tax payments for violating the no electioneering rule. This year, the IRS has announced heightened enforcement. A special political activity compliance initiative has been created. The tax agency has established an expedited process for dealing with reports of violations. I'm almost done. House of worship and nonprofit groups may sponsor voter registration drives and candidate forums if they are truly nonpartisan, and issue advocacy if broadly protected. But remember, tax law prohibits 501c3 groups from supporting or opposing candidates. I urge you to be especially wary of so-called voter guides. Such guides are often thinly veiled partisan materials. If the IRS finds that a violation has occurred, it may be the house of worship, not the organization that produced the guide, that is penalized. This letter is not intended to be a substitute for legal advice, and I urge you to consult with your legal advisor on specific questions. To learn more about issues surrounding religion and politics, visit our website, www.au.org. Click on our issues XYZ. Okay, so and then you see their address in Washington, D.C. In case you passed it or missed it, this was a letter to intimidate the households of faith and 501c nonprofit organizations to not vote or to not participate in political views and to share information with the people there. This was a letter of intimidation. Now, here's the thing. They brought up the IRS and the tax code. Here's the letter they sent. And in this letter, it looks so official on what they're saying as far as the IRS. And it's easily to be intimidating. But here's how much of the letter that actually comes from the website, or the truth that actually comes from the IRS website. Most of this was all of what they did. They did. What was the bottom line of this? How did this affect 2006? Listen. This affected the 2006 elections in the middle of Republican George Bush. Listen, Democrats won control of both houses that year. Democrats for the first time since 1994. In the Senate, Democrats won a gain of 6 seats in Senate. They also picked up 31 seats in the House of Reps. Also, Nancy Pelosi. Many of us should be familiar with this name at this point. This is when she won the House as well. Coincidence? Possibly. I'll let you decide. So the point that I'm bringing up, and the point that I'm hoping that you see, is that, oh, here's one more thing. Forgive me. Forgive me. So what is on their website today? That same that same site, that same Americans United Americans United for Separation of Church and State. Now we know that this is a very big year electionally. This is a very big year for the United States of America. So what is on their site today? This. Reproductive freedom is religious freedom. So I guess these are all women or their versions of women. Their version of reproduction freedom that basically deals with abortion. So you're telling me that abortion is religious freedom. This is the message that's being conveyed. This is today. This is real time. This is their website. So as far as the letter that they took out, they're purposeful targeting the household of faith, purposefully. And then it just so happens that the Democrats won by a landslide that year. Could that all be a coincidence? That I will leave up to you. So over the next month, or over the next couple of months, from now to November 3rd, I hope to meet with you once or twice a month. And as we get closer to November 3rd, it will probably be 3 to 4 times a month, probably in the cooler months, because there are some things that I would like to bring to your attention. All of which, just as we have done here, more so than what we've done here, because today was to lay down the bones. Today was to lay down the structure of what I hope to be able to accomplish or share with you at the very least, so that you can look at and you can see it and you can begin to delve into it yourself. Because as I had mentioned before, a lot of us are supporting parties that with platforms that no longer gel or does not or hasn't for a long time gelled with what we say our truest beliefs are. And if we're still not paying attention to that and we're paying attention to leader prejudices or biases as opposed to the policies, then we will not stand. It harms us. It harms us. And so over the next couple of weeks, I hope to be able to share with you some information or discuss with you information concerning the death culture that we have. Why is this happening right now? This goes anywhere from suicide assistance to abortion to the human composting law that was passed, I think last year, where they're taking human bodies and changing it or using it for compost. Which I would let you use your imagination on that. Also the virus and the would-be cure, digital vaccination. What does that mean? What about the digital vaccination 2020 ID? Also socialism. Why is the big push happening? Why are millennials being drawn to that? How to intervene? Is it congruent with spiritual principles? Is it the precursor? Or how does it compare with communism? What does that mean? Because here's the thing. Many of us are saying, oh, that's not going to happen to America. But if you would have gone 40 years and look at today, many of us would have said then what we see today would not happen on American soil. Information warfare, the information manipulation, this purposeful disinformation, purposeful misinformation, the change of language that's happening in our dictionaries that I don't think that we're aware of, the biased news, 90% of those news being controlled by corporations that have a specific agenda that is working to cause you to hate what they want you to hate, to love what they want you to love. The purpose of social media, the brain hacking that they're seeking to do, how social media is purposely designed to negatively impact your brain. According to them, it's not according to me, education and the dumbing down of America, what's happening in our Ivy League schools for some of us might be mind-blowing. the public education that's happening or lack thereof, the truth behind the LGBTQ agenda, salami politics that they said that they were going to impose against us since 1987. What's on the record based upon what they said, truth behind the Equality Act bill, the HR 5 bill, what it means for your churches, your religious institutions, women and children. The Drag Queen Story Hour, which is a 501c3 movement that have been, oh gosh, that is fanning out and that is gaining ground, also supported by the American Library Association. Pedophilia, which we know there is a great rise for that. A great rise as far as it's happening, becoming more prevalent in the forefront. The war against our children, the hypersexualization of our children. What is happening? How this is happening subtly, so that in a way that we're even participating in it and don't even realize that we are. The radical feminism that's happening. Also, have you seen what's happening to San Francisco? What's going on? How that could be headed here, so to speak. As far as New York, what's happening there? Oh gosh, so much is happening there. There's so much to share. And then on top of that, America is based upon documentation, based upon documents that you can pull up. These are not things that I've fabricated. These are just things you just dive into and you just kind of learn yourself. You research yourself, and these things are archived. A lot of it is archived in our National Archives.gov. A lot of it is archived information that you can pull up and access yourself. There is one that is considered one of the most biblically hostile United States presidents that hit the history. He has shown public acts of hostility toward people of biblical faith, acts of hostility toward using the military toward people of biblical faith, acts of hostility toward biblical values, and their preferentialism for Islam, and how this same president completely publicly disrespected the Christian community, while the Christian community always utters his praises. What is happening? The laws that are being promoted, the policies and the executive orders that have been put into practice that is affecting you today, that is affecting us today. And if we are not getting involved, if we are still looking to turn our heads, if we are still looking to get caught up on what they want us to get caught up on, then as the man said inside of that video, we will not make it. Finally, over the next few months, I hope to also be able to share with you what I call, for lack of a better way of having a fancy name for it, a watch night or movie night, where we can look at some of these documentaries, excuse me, together, so that those who have better access than you and I, they've served in the House of Congress. And so they're privy to things that you and I, as regular Americans, are not privy to. They can give us information. They can give us more information. And all of this is so that you can make a more informed decision. Finally, this is my last finally. And I hope, hopefully, Apostle Beeler, I would love for you to say a few words while hopefully that you're still here. This is my last finally, because I know that sometimes it is hard to get us out of our own thinking, because we can have our own way of thinking, and we're like, no, well, God is in control and I'm not going to do anything and he doesn't want me to vote. Where does it say that in Scripture? Right? And while he certainly is in control, it doesn't mean that we're not, as born again believers, those who are in a household of faith, that we ought to strive to choose leaders who will themselves support or promote those policies that are Christian values, that are beliefs and values that support the faith that we say that we have. That is something that is our responsibility, not his. That is something that we're supposed to do. If we're coming to let our light so shine that we may see, that others may see our good works, where are we doing that at? We have to come out of thinking that we don't have a right or should not get involved in places of influences in our culture and in our government. This is why we're here. And so please let us no longer be, if nothing else, like I said, as I'm wrapping this up, if nothing else, let us delve into delve into some research on our own, so that we're not just sitting back saying, well, I just hope, I just wish, someone else would do this. No, this is the time and this is the opportunity for us to protect, for us to promote, for us to preserve what we say is important. And if not, those freedoms that we have are going to be removed by people that we wish was not there, because their policies, forget personalities, it's the policies that's going to make a difference in whether your son or your daughter is being told that they're not what their biology says. It's what those policies, that's what's going to make the difference. And that's what